Daylight Savings Time is brought to you in high definition black and white. Hey dudes and dudettes, welcome back. I hope y'all had a good Easter weekend despite what's going on in the world. Now originally this weekend was supposed to see the premiere of No Time to Die, the 25th James Bond picture. Due to the coronavirus it has, for now, been postponed to November. This is disappointing to all of us James Bond fans, but understandable to keep people safe. In the meantime, if you need to get your James Bond fix on, I'd like to present a little fan theory of mine. If you watched my first video showing off my VHS collection, I said Michael Bay has a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card because he made The Rock. I also said that I believe this movie is truly Sean Connery's last James Bond movie, and today I want to explain that. If you haven't seen it, The Rock is a solid action movie starring Sir Sean Connery, the manliest man who ever manned. It also co-stars Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris, along with a plethora of familiar faces from Jim Caviezel, Michael Biehn, Claire Forlani, Tony Todd, David Morse, Philip Baker Hall, Raymond Cruz, John C. McGinley, and of course, John Spencer. It's the kind of movie where every few minutes you stop, point at the screen, and say, "Hey, it's that guy." Now, I was introduced to the James Bond movies in the fall of 1995. I was gifted a VHS of Dr. No, the first James Bond movie, and saw GoldenEye starring Pierce Brosnan when it hit theaters that November. I did not see The Rock when it arrived in theaters in the summer of 1996 because I was too young, but did see it when it was available to rent, inspiring a trip to San Francisco a couple of years later, and my theory that Connery was really 007 in the film. This theory started off as just something I'd say while talking movies with friends, but after we entered the Daniel Craig era of Bond movies, when Bond became more serious, my belief in this theory only grew exponentially. Also, as a kid, one day a buddy and I were playing superheroes in my backyard. I said I would play the Phantom, which also came out in 1996, and my friend said he would be the Rock, a superhero whose superpower would be to turn into a rock. Yeah, that's just as sad today as it was then. Anywho, I'll present my argument starting with the small points, how The Rock references previous Bond movie moments, the medium points, mainly how I think Sean Connery was still competing with his fellow Bond actors, and the larger point of how the movie's timeline matches Connery's tenure as James Bond. Here we go. Now, in order for this to work, you have to believe in the fan theory that James Bond is just a code name assigned to MI6 agents. Meaning that James Bond is not like a comic book character where it's the same guy who just never ages and is always placed in a modern setting. Instead, it's a different guy every time. Now, I don't really subscribe to this theory. For instance, if this were true, it would mean that the CIA does the same thing with every agent who goes by Felix Leiter. Also, both the Roger Moore Bond and the Timothy Dalton Bond reference being married, something that happened under George Lazenby's tenure. However, backing up the theory is that the character of M has changed chronologically. Also, Robert Brown, the second M, previously played an admiral in The Spy Who Loved Me, and Ralph Fiennes and Judi Dench both shared screen time in Skyfall, implying that there could be a line of succession for that character. And, I don't know, maybe we can explain away the marriage references. Maybe Roger Moore's Bond was just paying his respects to the fallen wife of a fellow agent, and maybe Dalton's Bond had lost someone as well, just as Daniel Craig's Bond had lost Vesper Lynd. Anyway, I need this theory to be a thing in order to make my argument, so let's go with it. Now let's start with the small reasons why I think Connery is Bond in The Rock. First off, the movie has somewhat over-the-top traps and lines of dialogue that feel very Bondy. You have a baby doll rigged to fire a chemical weapon, and an unnecessarily over-engineered furnace thing that Connery has to navigate through to escape a locked room. A lot of people who have watched The Rock would appreciate that Connery makes reference to being trained by British intelligence, and reuses his line, "But of course you are," which is clearly a callback to a line he said to Plenty O'Toole in Diamonds Are Forever. He also has a few cheeky one-liners here and there like, "I hope you're insured," and "Have a nice day." Second, John Spencer describing Connery's character, John Mason, as a professional escape artist really, to me, brings back memories to Connery's James Bond tenure. His escape from his Alcatraz cell seems to echo his prison cell escape talents in Dr. No, and another escape attempt from Goldfinger. Third, the Navy SEALs use underwater vehicles that feel very reminiscent of the ones used in the final battle in Thunderball. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. I don't want to imply that the producers, writers, and director intended to make a James Bond ripoff when they made The Rock. That would be a disservice to the work of Jerry Bruckheimer, the late Don Simpson, and everyone involved in the making of this picture. So I should cover my butt and say that The Rock is not trying to be a James Bond movie, but as a fan, I just want to see more of Sean Connery's Bond. Connery's John Mason character is not James Bond. I just want him to be James Bond. I'm simply having some fun and speculating like movie fans are wont to do. If The Rock, which was made by Hollywood Pictures, a subsidiary of Disney, had enough similarities to a James Bond picture, they would vehemently get sued by Eon Productions. Which brings me to my next point. Now, my medium-sized argument has to do with the year 1983, when we had two James Bond movies come out in the same year, and by different studios. I won't get into all the details, but some James Bond story elements were claimed by Kevin McClory, and he was therefore able to produce Never Say Never Again, starring a returning Sean Connery, and Eon Productions released Octopussy starring Roger Moore. Here's where I really put on my movie conspiracy theory hat and go out on a limb to assume that Connery, a former bodybuilder and one of the biggest movie stars of all time, has a competitive streak that includes a character he helped create by being the first actor to portray him. Yeah, a really far-out conspiracy theory, right? Connery went up against Moore's movie, and Octopussy made more money at the box office, though Never Say Never Again also did good business. 2 years later, Roger Moore would appear in A View to a Kill, his final James Bond movie. In A View to a Kill, Moore has an action set piece through the streets of San Francisco. I wonder if Connery, who is also an executive producer on The Rock, insisted on his own badass chase scene through the streets of San Francisco in a game of friendly one-upmanship over a fellow Bond actor. Plus, Never Say Never Again ends with Connery winking into the camera after saying he'd never return. I thought I was on to another point in my favor when I thought The Rock came out the same year as GoldenEye, but upon checking I was off a bit. The two came out 7 months apart. Although, now that I'm looking at this slide, isn't it a little odd that Brosnan and Connery are in the center of the poster, holding a gun, flanked by two co-stars? Just saying. Well played, marketing guys. Well played. Finally, my biggest, large-sized argument deals with how the John Mason character's background lines up with the timeline of Connery's Bond movies. When Daniel Craig took over the role of James Bond in 2006, the tone of the franchise, thankfully, became more serious. Later, with this tone still on my mind, I rewatched The Rock, and suddenly the fan in me could imagine this film fitting in with modern James Bond movies. And then this line got my attention. In The Rock, Mason is said to have been a British national incarcerated on Alcatraz in 1962, escaped in '63. He was caught at the Canadian border after stealing secret FBI files that belonged to J. Edgar Hoover and held without trial, with the British claiming they never heard of him. Using language from the Mission Impossible films, you could say he was disavowed. Now, if you go by the UK release date, Dr. No came out October 5th, 1962, and was released in the US May 8th, 1963. From Russia with Love was released in the UK October 11th, 1963, and in the US April 8th, 1964. Alcatraz Prison shut down March 21st, 1963. Using either release date as a reference point, Connery's Bond could have gone on a mission to steal the FBI files before or after the events of Dr. No, and have escaped in time for From Russia with Love to happen. I also always had a hard time believing John Mason when he said he swam from Alcatraz to the shore through freezing water that surely would have killed him. But if, say, a British agent was waiting in a nearby boat to pick up captured agent James Bond, that I could believe. I'd also like to point out a moment in Dr. No when Bernard Lee's M chastises Bond for his gun jamming on his last job, and that he spent 6 months in the hospital as a consequence. Now, to be fair, M did say Bond was in hospital, not captured and imprisoned. Still, the implication is that something went wrong on Bond's previous mission, and M reminds him that he has a license to kill, not get killed. Now, Mason did eventually get caught and imprisoned for decades. He has a daughter, Jade, after meeting her mother at a Led Zeppelin concert before being captured again. We're told FBI Director Hoover was not able to use Mason's daughter as leverage to recover the stolen files because in 1972, Hoover was dead and Jade wasn't born yet. The best guess we have for when Mason's incarceration began is when we're shown his prison records, and it says that he was transferred from San Quentin Prison to Wolfburg Penitentiary in 1976. I point out that date because Connery's last official James Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever, was released in December 1971. So you have about a 5-year window for John Mason and/or James Bond to be captured. Meanwhile, Roger Moore took over the role of James Bond in 1973. Mason is also described as being born in Glasgow, which can either be a reference to Bond's Scottish ancestry or a reference to Connery himself, though Connery was born in Fountain Bridge, Scotland, which is in the area of Edinburgh. Well, there it is. I hope y'all enjoyed this little fan theory / movie conspiracy of mine. It's not perfect. Obviously, if you reject the idea of each James Bond being a different agent, or toss in 1983's Never Say Never Again, my timeline falls apart, as the final unofficial Bond movie starring Sean Connery would undo my attempt to include The Rock in his history. But I've had 2 decades to think about this, and I still believe it. It all could be a coincidence, or, as a friend on Twitter said, this could be a Count Arlock Nosferatu situation, where they didn't have the rights to the character, but used it as a blueprint. Regardless, please give The Rock a look sometime. It's a great action movie, and it even captures that X-Files conspiracy theory vibe of the 90s by making references to Hoover's files containing the secret about aliens landing at Roswell and the truth about the JFK assassination. These casual references fit in fine in the 90s when alien autopsies and moon landing conspiracy specials aired on TV. Please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. And I hope we all get to enjoy No Time to Die when it is released in theaters. No Time to Die, of course, being scored by Hans Zimmer, who also just happened to have scored The Rock. My name is James. Most people call me James, and please don't talk or think too much.